Okay, so what I'm gonna talk to you about, or my talk is called like, what? Our game is local multiplayer. It's because it's actually not when we started creating this game that I'm working on right now, it was definitely not designed or taught to be a multiplayer game. So that's the reason why my talk will introduce a little bit the game and my background and why we are doing what we're doing, and tell you how we got to make a pretty awesome multiplayer game on a non-budget. Like, we've done zero to make the game multiplayer, but just to add controllers. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. I'll do this as short as possible, and you will see the game later. So I'm a co-owner of, or like a CEO of Knapno Games. And this game that I'm going to talk about is called Affordable Space Adventures, and it's actually a collaboration with Niflas Games. He's known for Knut Underground, Knut Stories, and we are known for like party games like Spin the Bottle, Bumpy's Party, and Button, Darkroom Sex Game. But this is my team pretty much that works on Affordable Space Adventures. So we have Nicholas is the one that drinks the coffee, and the rest is Knapno Games. So we are like this is pretty much the core bunch that is developing the game that I'm going to talk about. And so our background, Knapno Games' background is, so we exist for 4.5 years, and we've been really like focused on like making games for like motion controllers and all these like alternative controllers, pretty much going into the space that like a traditional game developer wouldn't. So I think when we finished university, we kind of recognized there is this, motion controllers coming out, and I know you probably think crap about them, but there is like space to make amazing games if you don't think as the traditional games that we all know and we've played through the years. So we kind of stick to the idea to make different games focused on like very specific, like novel interfaces, we call it, like the VU. Our game, this particular game is a very specific VU game. And we have like 3 things we incorporate into our like strategy, or like when we think about making games, or it's like a design approach, you can call it. And that's like, we always, accept affordances and constraints of the hardware and controllers and use them actively. So it's like, we really look at the controller, like what is the view remote, what can it do, what can it can't do, and like really try to incorporate what it can do, and maybe even incorporate what it can't do, but don't like think too ambitious, like don't make it something that it's not. So that's how we we design games. We really, really explore first the hardware, and we make something that fits specifically to that hardware. Then we also always consider the social context. That's why I'm here. Like, we always do local multiplayer. We really focus on games. We want to make games that are fun to watch. Like, it should be awesome to be audience or participate, and it should produce good pictures and videos. Just like an important part. And we always jam it, so we always prototype the idea and try to see if there is potential. Everything sounds good on paper, and especially if it's something that comes from your mind. Often, we all think that, wow, this sounds really good, but try prototype it and see if it really, really works. I've had failed projects, miserably failed projects, which sounded amazing on paper, because we didn't necessarily know the platform that well that we were designing the game for example. And then when you start designing the game for the platform, you realize, oh, okay, maybe it's not that possible or great. So we've been involved in making several games, and they're all party games. So we've done this Troll demo is like a failing project. Learned a lot from it. Made from this complicated V game that we planned, we made this super awesome and very simple game called Button, where you just kind of run and push controllers and fight for the controller pretty much. And you do small, silly things that don't even matter in the game. But it's a lot of fun. It's all about being in the right mood. Then we did a demo for Xbox, where you really do a fighting game, 3D. Positioning matters, and it's slow motion, because the Kinect doesn't really, it's very slow or bad at really seeing depth and movement, especially if you're doing it fast. So you can interpolate, and if you force the player to be slow motion, you can get better results. So basically, as I said, we really focused on taking the advantages of the platform. Made like a really interesting, like the Matrix slow motion shooting kind of game. It didn't get published, but it probably will be at some point, because at that time you couldn't self-publish. And as we all know, Microsoft was doing like Kinectimals and really believing in the casual space. They didn't want like a hardcore Kinect game. They were not interested in publishing. Then we did Spin the Bottle. I'll show you a little bit of a video and tell you about it. And now we're doing Affordable Space Adventures. So why it matters to know about this game is it was really like when the VU came out, the journalists were saying like, this is pretty much a game that shows what the VU is about. And they were really excited about the game, but unfortunately, because it's a multiplayer game where you need to have more than 3 players playing, because you always pair up randomly, it's a very hard kind of sell, or it's like a really hard setting for you at home to have like the VU and invite like 8 people to play this with. But it's super fun, and it has kind of actually a very commercial approach, and it worked very well. We are very happy how much we kind of sold. What is going on? So there you go. So you can see it a little bit here. There is no sound, but that's all right. So it's like you do these mini challenges, and you use the View, like you use accelerator data from the View remote, and you do it in the simplest possible way, so you don't complicate things, basically. So we did like one round of a lot of like mini games, of which you can see some examples here, and then we released actually an update where we used instead of the View remote, then we used only the gamepad for making like the mini games, and I will show that in a moment. There we go. And so all these mini games are now together in the game, but at this point we were like, okay, let's experiment only with the gamepad and use the camera, use the acceleration data there. So act like an animal. You have to guess what the person is, seeing on the screen and acting like. Yeah, you find hats, take pictures with them. Oops. So you do body twister with the gamepad. So one person places the gamepad on a body part, and you kind of hit the screen with a body part. You control it with your feet. So basically, exactly as I say, focus on the very simple things rather than actually overcomplicating things. So that's kind of what this game is about. I think you get it. Now we're making them laugh. Okay, good. And then we have Niflas. So Niflas is like amazing one-person, game designer, makes amazing puzzles, very atmospheric. He did Knut Underground for VU. He was in our office when we were doing Spin the Bottle. We were just hanging out as friends and just offering him a desk, come and hang out. And then the VU just came out. We really wanted to, we played games like every Friday on the VU because we were developing a VU game, he was developing a VU game, and then we were discussing, what would you make if you, just a screenshot of Knut Underground. Then we were like, what would you make if you actually, if you make a VU game specific? And Niklas was pretty much the one saying, like, what about the spaceship game where, the secondary screen and the gamepad could be like your control panel, and you can like control a bunch of stuff. It's like in Star Trek or something like that. And then it was a joke that started a bit like a joke, and then we all loved the idea and actually kind of wrote down the idea and specifics, and we decided, let's make this, let's prototype this and see what happens. So we kind of like, since we are a experienced video developer at that point, we already published the game, and Niklas has this amazing eye for levels and detail. So we decided, let's try it out. Together we have the skills for this. So we designed an interface. We tried to design this game where you really feel like you're the captain of the spaceship and you're really flying around areas, and it's all you can do is like adjust your systems and not be noticed by enemies. So it's not really action. It's like you get a very engineering feeling that you're really learning how to control this thing. This is how it pretty much looks, and this is kind of how This is an old prototype of the interface, but you can just get the idea that like the screen, the secondary screen, is actually a big part of your tools or your controls. So it's not just a map or something like that. It's actually the buttons and systems that you can turn and off or like adjust values on some of these systems. So the experience, I actually have a video here. I think I will show that first. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of how the game looks and how it plays. So it's a bit, it's a kind of dark. You use a flashlight to maneuver around. And the flashlight can turn into a scanner so you can scan enemies. And it also has a little flare that can help you reach things. Like you can shoot a flare to reach things that you can't reach usually. So you will just see here an example of how you scan an enemy, I think. Or maybe, this guy knows how to pass this one. Okay, so here's Niklas playing the game. There he's scanning an enemy. He looks down at the screen, and then the screen tells him, oh, this is sensitive to heat. Like, then you have to adjust your system so it doesn't produce that much heat, and then you're free to go. Then they don't see you. So basically the whole game, that's the main mechanic. But the interesting thing is that you play so much with a second screen, and this is like something that is not often seen in a game. So that's the screen. And so the big part of designing this game is actually designing that interface in a super user-friendly way. And of course there's, about beautiful worlds and exploring, because it's a very it's not an action game, it's more slow game. So of course we pay attention a lot to the environments and details in there. There he makes a mistake. That doesn't work, so then he tries something else, that works. And there is no one solution to all the puzzles. There's multiple solutions. So it's has a huge replayable value in a way, because the more you know it, the more interesting it actually becomes to pass these levels faster or easier. And then I can just let this video in the background, and I'll tell you just shortly about the multiplayer. I don't have really a video of it, and it's not something... I actually played it on stage at the Nintendo Treehouse event, live event, with someone that didn't know how to play the game. So there is a lot of I'm not showing it just because there's a lot of me talking and explaining what it is, so you don't get the idea. But the point is that when we developed this game, since we, as a studio, at least my interest and my game designer and our studio interest is very much multiplayer, local multiplayer. How do you, get to play with other people, and the atmosphere is different. So we were thinking, but this game has so many controls. You move the spaceship, you move a flashlight, you have a scanner attached to the flashlight. Then you have this brain, the screen. So there's actually a lot of controls, and it's pretty tough. You have to learn the game. You have to play it from the beginning and get all these systems introduced. Otherwise, it's also even too difficult for you to play. So we were wow, but then what if you split the controls and I control the spaceship and you control the light. The third one is the engineer, And we prototyped that quickly. So without doing any level content differently or anything, this game just becomes a different experience. Then it's like a space team. You have to really talk to each other. So if you're playing, if you don't know the game and if you play it together, you figure it out faster if you speak to each other. You just don't get it if you don't talk to each other. It's you just don't, because everybody has a super important part or role in the game. And we were wow, okay, this works. This game is also a multiplayer now, a local multiplayer game. And literally, we do it with zero budget. All we did is add the support of connecting multiple controllers and choosing which controller will take over what control. There is a limit to what you can do. You can't change, there is the brain, and the brain is the brain, but you can split, who takes, for example, the scanner and who takes the spaceship movement. So we have enjoying now ourselves very much, because we don't have to pay attention at all even to designing specific levels. It works out very well, and it creates this setting where, especially you can play with a non-experienced player easily. So if you I don't know if that's your partner or a child, for example. You can like hand them over just the spaceship movement, for example, so they just move around while you're doing all the engineering work and stuff. So it just became like a super interesting game that can be way easier or way harder, depends who you play it with. And that's what I think is brilliant about multiplayer games, or especially local multiplayer games. It gives a completely different feeling to who you're playing it with and what the setting is than yourself. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you about. And I have a last thing that is like, So I think it's very important to show your games to fellow developers or, publishers or whatever, depends what your goal is. So we've been developing V games for such a long time, and especially now a VU game. And it's super hard to show these things, because you have to carry a TV with you and a VU, and it's just really difficult. So I have created this mobile VU station with a super small a tin screen and a battery speaker and the VU console and the controllers and the gamepad, and it all can run on one outlet, one power outlet. And it took me such a long time, and I think it's super. To build this, to really understand what we can do, the smallest setting we can have. And I think it's super important to show it, and especially if you have a multiplayer game, so even single player doesn't matter, but it's super important to show it and see, what people think, especially at industry events or events like this. So I kind of wanted to show it and encourage everybody to do it, no matter what platform you work on, no matter how hard your setup is. Think about how to make it more mobile, basically. And today is possible more than ever, I would say. So that's basically it, and I hope I get some questions. I don't know what more to go deeper in. So, yes. Yeah, so I guess you heard it all, and if you haven't, it was just a remark that making games for an experienced and non-experienced player can be really interesting, because you get to learn another person, a parent and a child is a very good example. One of the big reasons, why we thought about parent and a child is because, two people in my company started having first time, someone is having kids, in the company. Suddenly their mind also changes a bit more. It's I have a son or a daughter. It will be cool that I can play games with them together in an early stage where they're still, not that good and beat me or whatever. So, and it makes the power, the play more balanced in this way. It's a really good idea. And once you put a third player, actually it just becomes a mess. So then it's really hard. We try. I played it earlier with someone, and it's really, you have to talk to each other, which can be very difficult. Or you get to know each other, and then you become good at it. Yes?
What's the maximum number of players for Knut?
For Knut?
Yeah.
One. That's a single player. So Knut Underground, or Niklas is very good at doing single player. The Spin the Bottle, Bumpy's Party. So Knapnock, we've been doing only multiplayer mostly until now. Nifla's been doing single player. And then Affordable Space Adventure is a very good example of what we've been focusing on, this multiplayer. Yeah, Space Adventures. That one is for 3. I think we've been trying to experiment if we can do it for more than 3 players, but it becomes... it's possible actually, but it might become too little for the 4th player, what that person can do. And it's also just a natural spread is up to 3 players, I would say. And 2 players, it's more interesting because you can take the flashlight and the movement, so you have more to do. But it depends who you play with. If you play with a child that is super basic, for example, you can give it only the movement or only the scanner. So we really play with as much as possible options. But I think 3 is the perfect or max. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is if it's by splitting the controllers, it becomes, okay, I'll just answer it. So splitting the controllers becomes actually more difficult, especially if you're good at the game, or if you're playing puzzle games yourself. It's also puzzle games is not something you often play like together collaboratively. I mean, there's more and more now, I think. But so what is happening here is that we're creating really on purposely a very frustrating experience if you don't talk to each other. So there's the idea is like, this is for you to get to know each other and for you to get closer and really start communicating. So it's like Space Team, but with more meaning. So in Space Team, you'll yell at each other and you almost press each other's things because you can't hear what's going on. And in this game, it's a bit more like, it actually could be more frustrating that you play with a bad player. But at the same time, after a while, you realize that it's never because of that one player. It's because of the dynamic of the 2 or 3 players who are playing together. It's never one player's fault because there's hidden information for almost all players, especially the one with the brain, with the second screen, has information that the other 2 don't see. So that person has a huge responsibility to make the other 2 like shine in a way. So it's a very good balance that the frustration is never because you specifically don't know how to control this spaceship. It's about like, well, it's all our fault. We really have to talk to each other. Yeah. That's it. Thank you very much. That's my Twitter and email. You're welcome to write.